Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask Adam Live. Ask is the acronym for Always Seek Knowledge. One thing I've strived to do each day, and I encourage you to do the same in your life, is to always ask questions. If it's something you don't know, investigate, learn. Whether it's something you're trying to learn for your career or personal understanding, certainly dive deep into that question just to understand, just to know. Seek to know a little bit more each day, that which can make your life better and fulfilling. Caution, that which is not fulfilling to your life, you might want to disregard. That's not something you want to seek. But ask is to always seek knowledge. Adam is my name, and as always, the show is live. Ask Adam Live. Now, let's get into today's episode. Cultivating creativity in business and life. Creativity isn't a talent, it's a tool you can train and you can trust. Creativity isn't for artists, it's oxygen for your soul and innovation for your business. Whether you're solving a logistics problem, writing a pitch, or building a new life, creativity is your superpower. See, I've had to reinvent myself several times, and I found myself diving into this creativity pool in many different facets. Whether it was learning the real estate world, understanding more of the trucking industry, supply chain industry, as well as with speaking and coaching that I do today. These reinventions, each time I participated, well, required imagination. It required understanding not only how things got done, but how I could do them differently, how I could do them more effectively, how I could do them to, say, pivot around the norms and the expectations. And I think that's many times where I stood out, where I was different, where I was unique. And I think at the end of the day, quite frankly, that's what made me the best at whatever I did, was always coming towards that with that attitude of creativity. In this episode, I'll show you how to train your creativity like a muscle, unlock unconventional thinking, and reignite curiosity. Even if you think you're lost your spark, I guarantee you, by the end of this episode, you will have found it again. Creativity is a life strategy, not a hobby. Something you do every day, something you tune. It's like I said, a muscle. It's not something you just kind of mess around with seasonally. Creativity is quite frankly, it's a well that you're always going to want to access. So know where it's at and know what you can get from it. Creativity isn't a painting, it's a problem solving with soul. It's how you navigate change, create connection, and design your next move. According to neuroscience, creativity activates the default mode network, the brain's imagination engine, if you will. And people who practice creativity regularly have a better adaptability, emotional regulation, and great at idea generation. Let me ask you, where have you told yourself you're not creative? And where could you already be using it every day? Let's take the 10-minute curiosity sprint. Set a timer, journal or brainstorm around a challenge. What's another way to do things? Ask yourself this. And don't censor. Let the silly ideas surface. You'll be surprised at the creativity that can bubble up from the bottom to the top. I always like to use the what if reframe, and I replace it with the I can. What if I could do this backwards, faster, cheaper, or with someone else's help? Innovation often hides in absurdity. I mean, just think about it for a minute. We're riding around in strangers' cars and paying them to take us somewhere. That's the thing called Uber and Lyft and rideshare. It was a 20 years ago, I don't think anybody thought they were going to get into a stranger's car and go anywhere, but yet we're doing it. The advent of the internet, it seems to be our go-to place for entertainment, for companionship, for education. It's really a pillar in our society at this point. And all it was supposed to do was just connect things. And just look what AI is doing today as well. Kind of silly that you're asking a, a system, a process, a large language model, I believe is what they call it, and you're asking it questions and asking it to dive deep into uh, deeper questions and more insight. Did you think you were going to do that 20 years ago? No, the world's evolving and it's changing, and it's all because somebody decided that they were going to be a little bit more creative, that they were going to create something. I mean, the artificial intelligence wasn't just something that came about, it was something that was developed. And part of its developness was the idea that we were going to keep and store things. And we were going to keep and store things so that we had a reference. So now you have these large language models that are going back to that data, even as silly as some of it is, but it can still tell you hordes of information. And the ability that it can scan it at such a rapid pace is pretty creative. So, how can we do that on the human level? How can we apply that to our creativity and dive deep into what we see and what we understand? And feel free to go to AI to get a little spark of creativity. I wouldn't certainly rely on it, but maybe if you have a specific idea, ask AI, hey, this is my idea, give me 10 scenarios. Hey, this is what I'm thinking I would like to do, give me the different points of pivot. What have other people done and what are other people not doing? You know, that's an interesting point right there, is just ask AI what others aren't doing. Ask the question that, hey, what's the question nobody's asking about this topic? That's creativity. You know, begin with asking the question that's not being asked. You know, kind of come around from another way, right? Backwards, faster, cheaper. You know, some of the micro creative practices are rearranging your office, getting a different perspective. Instead of facing the window, turn away from the window. Instead of looking at people in the office, turn around and look at the window, look at a wall, look at your vision board. Get a different perspective, a different feeling. Let the sun shine on your desk, not away from your desk. These can change your perspectives almost overnight. Tell your story in a new way. We all have our stories. We all repeat ourselves. But what if you turned it about? What if you said it differently? What if it became received better or different? One of the things I enjoy doing once in a while is just taking a different route somewhere. I mean, I know how to get there. I can follow directions pretty well, but what if I took another path? You know, in my truck driving world, I know it wasn't appreciated all the time that, you know, because it's all about miles, how many miles from point A to point B. But I started to challenge myself was what if I could reduce the miles? What if I took a different route that shaved the miles? Because many of the companies that I worked for, they had a prescribed route that said you had to take, and give or take, if there were not any regulations. If there weren't, then certainly I was safe to take that route. And I would always challenge myself to take the shortest route, to take the least amount of miles. And yeah, it might have been a slower road, but I was there for the ride. I was going to be there anyway. And it sometimes got me off the interstate and got to see some places. And quite frankly, at the end of the day, I made better time because it was shorter miles and because I was consistent, but that was being creative. In real estate, I came up with a different portfolio, a different perspective. And so when I would approach clients about the selling of their home, I presented them with this, and they're like, nobody else does this. And that was many times that level of creativity is what got me the business, was because I was approaching things differently. Someone wanted to sell their home, I asked them 10 questions. They wanted to discuss the listing contract. I said, well, depending on how you answer the 10 questions, depends on whether or not we're going to even get that far. That was creativity. And the presentation alone, I always tried to be a little bit different. Many people had laminated or books or presentations, or mine was always a step ahead. What if I did this? What if I did that? What if I showed you what the future looked like through statistics and stats? And if we sold at this time versus this time, here's the difference in income. It was many times they were already built up for the discussion of commission. To me, that was sort of already in place. That really didn't matter. It was, how long did you want to wait before you sold your home? Again, one of the 10 questions. So again, it's just those micro practices, those little creative things that I adapted over time. They started out small, but then became really big projects and events that led to productivity and to having a better event at work, which led to better relationships. So give yourself a chance, rewire the nervous system by doing something different. Challenge yourself, take that different route to work and get to work on time. Maybe you have to leave a little early, maybe explore that sense of nervousness that you might not make it to work, and be okay with that, be comfortable with it because you're doing something different. Many times that's the simple exercise of just experiencing the emotions and knowing how to handle them. I mean, almost equivalent to the cold shower theory that I've talked about before, is being uncomfortable, but knowing that uncomfortableness is okay and being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Taking that different route to work, taking that road less traveled, if you will. Give it a try. Give yourself a little extra time and go adventure and do it. And be okay with doing something different, not being concerned that you're not doing the same thing the same way. It, interestingly enough, it helps to rewire a little bit of that exploratory side of our brain. And you'll find that once you're exercising the exploratory side of your brain, and then you sit down to do this other task called being creative, that you've exercised that muscle and you're going to think slightly differently because you're not afraid to be uncomfortable with the uncomfortable, the uncertainty. You're actually eager, much like getting to point A to point B using a different route. You're eager to see, hey, how does this play out in a playful way and not stressful way? I found with many of the events that a little bit of tweaking, some of that was with feedback from individuals. And I would tweak some of our programs, which has made them so successful today, is because those small adjustments of creativity. And it wasn't necessarily relying on my own sense of creativity, but just asking my clients, hey, what's something that you feel could have been done a little different? And then I take that and I apply that to the next time. And I see, hey, same thing. I ask the same questions. What do everything, you say everything was successful. Is there something that could have been just slightly different, slightly a little change that you feel could make it better? And they would share, and I'd say, "Oh, that's good. That's creative. I like that." Then we'd add it to the thing, and many times it was taking away either the last thing or a previous thing and replacing it with a new thing. It wasn't that we made the workshops any bigger, any longer, any more taxing, because many people do say they're long and they go on, but implementing some small things, some interactive things sometimes is what's made it better. And from that, we evolved into a really great system. But it was by also constantly having the mindset to utilize tools of creativity and using creative thinking to implement those tools. We would take the suggestions and still brainstorm and say, okay, how can this be implemented to meet our brand and our focus and our mission and our values and put those into place? Absolutely. And like I said, it's made for a really great curriculum. So don't be afraid to do something a little different and just explore. And if anything, you might find that it's maybe not the best change, but when you're starting at that smaller scale is the best time to be creative and to find that creativity. Creativity in business equals that competitive advantage. Branding is not just colors and fonts, it's the emotional resonance that you're presenting. In operations, it's creative systems equal efficiency and joy in getting the task accomplished. It's not surprising that some of the major brands out there, they have the colors and their logo is a certain font or format. Some of them are even copywritten fonts that can't be replicated. That's how strong they are about their brand and what they want to demonstrate, what they want to be remembered for. In your business operation, creative systems that are saving with time management and help collect data and analyze data that you can learn to pivot. That's your competitive advantage is if you can do something slightly better or slightly faster, freeing up time for creativity than the other person while they're drowning in the nuances of the business and you're outsourcing to allow for time to be creative with your staff. That equals efficiency and the joy in your business of expanding. With sales, creativity equals storytelling plus empathy, and that equals connection. Like I said, my sales career, sometimes sharing the story, when I would get combated, if you will, of the sale of a home, for instance, and it's like, well, we're really stuck on this price, and I would share with them the story of a couple clients ago of somebody that was in the same situation that you are, and here's where they were at. And believe it or not, they were in the same neighborhood, and here's some of the things that they experienced was this, and this. Is that something that you want to have to go through, or do you want to go ahead and start at this position and eliminate that? And many times it was like, wow, we didn't know that. Didn't know, yeah, that those were concerns and issues and stuff we had to deal with. But yeah, we certainly don't want to deal with that. Let's be preemptive. I think that was one of the big things. I was always very preemptive with clients to let them know here's what we could experience, here's the good, bad, and indifferent of this transaction, and basically prepare them for what could happen. And many times we strategically placed ourselves to avoid some of that. Now, again, seems like that was a business that was living and breathing. So it never failed. The things that were unknown still showed up. But again, the creativity and the learning to pivot time after time, I think is what made me a good agent. And it's what made my clients uh, both empathetic for the transaction as well as felt like even though there may or may not have been some sacrifices, that it was still a successful transaction. You know, logic makes you think, creativity makes you act. So you want to always be thinking creatively and you always want to act. And even like I said, if it's small steps, take 10 minutes and be thinking about something and then maybe spend another 10 minutes creatively acting upon it. And if it's just not panning out, then try again. You know, in that first 10 minutes, if you've made a list of several things, start at the first one and act on it, see how it works. And if it's not working, then go to the next one on the list. Certainly out of five, you'll find one. And if not, again, go back to the 10 minutes of creative thinking and you'll find that this exercise leaps you into more of a creative mode. Again, this creativity is a muscle. You really have to exercise it daily. You really have to, um, yeah, you got to tune into it, almost like your favorite radio station. Tune into it every day. So creativity, you want to dial into it. And if it's starting your day with maybe a journal or just a sketch, a whiteboard, and just be like, okay, what can I do today? And you may only come up with one or two things, but then tomorrow you sit down again, you say, what can I be, what can I do that's creative? Then you're going to come up with 5 to 10 things. And then the next day you might come up with 15 or 20 things. And all of a sudden, like I said, once you open this door, your creativity is always just ready to roll. Keep in mind, though, you can write these things down all day long, but you do have to act. And so act on some, make notes. Those that are successful, continue with how they're working with your practice. If they're not successful, scratch them off and know that you've practiced that. And it helps to keep some notes. So you can just see, hey, I've tried that already. That's been creative. Or this hasn't been creative. I like to put those notes into an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, and that allows you to go into the formulas option and you can select whether or not something has repeated. And that way, once you see that something is repeated, if you put that in as part of your creativity list, you know that you've already dealt with that. And it's your mind kind of being repetitive, not creative. You know, at Ask Adam Live, every talk, worksheet, and strategy is built with creative intent, not just structure. And I've always said the whole foundation of this is soul, understanding your soul's purpose. How can you be creative to find your soul's purpose? Reclaiming creativity in life. Let me share with you some of the exercises through neuroencoding. Creativity increases dopamine flow and emotional resilience. Repetition and joy are essential. As I say, practice with praise. This rewires creativity back into your default operating system. And again, that's what we're always trying to do is constantly update and adjust our operating system so that we're functioning at our most highest version of ourselves. So here's your practice. Try something new weekly, like cook without a recipe. Improvise a conversation. Maybe tell a story out loud. As I mentioned earlier, switch up your story. Tell something different. Be creative. When I started to learn to be creative, it didn't look like a challenge anymore to me. I learned rediscover a little bit of the fun in what it was I was doing. It allowed me to connect with others because I asked them what they were doing, what was successful for them, what was not successful. I would take those notes back and determine what my creativity could be from the good, bad, and the indifferent. Especially when reinventing, man, that felt like pressure. Changing jobs, changing careers, who does that? But I found that by enacting creativity in each one of these pivots, it allowed me to be the best version of myself in each one of these steps and stages. It allowed the learning curve to tighten up a little bit because I was being creative. And through that creativity, I was becoming successful. So find your way to be creative, to exercise this muscle of creativity, to increase this dopamine flow. I hear us talk about statistics about how we're constantly on social media and it's just giving us this rage of dopamine that just has us coming back for more. Well, like I said earlier, do something different. What if instead of scrolling social media today, you're sitting down with that spreadsheet and starting to type out some of these points of creativity, some of these things that you're naturally good at? And then how can you be creative on top of doing your natural abilities? Do one thing differently today on purpose. See, creativity isn't about talent, it's about trust and training. Your brain wants to solve problems beautifully. Use creativity to lead, love, and live with a deeper purpose. So I ask you today, start with creativity. Find what it is you do now. Maybe discover something you love to do. Hint, hint, your soul's purpose. And then do one thing differently today on purpose. Feel free to share it with at Ask Adam Live using hashtag Creative Moves Challenge. And as a bonus, we'll have available with this video, download the Creative Moves Tracker in the show notes. See, when you make space for creativity, you make space for growth because imagination isn't a luxury. It's your most loyal tool for reinvention. If you found this show helpful, please click like or subscribe. If you know that this show might be helpful for someone else, please share. Remember, always seek knowledge, and let's go out and creatively make it a great day.